Right, here we have our tube. It has 2 live ends. We're going to twist it and join it together. First of all, what I think I'm going to do is I have this tail of yarn with my little half hitch on it from where I undid my provisional cast on. I'm going to just weave that yarn away, and so that little half hitch stitch is secured. Okay, so we have all our stitches on both ends of our needles, and we need to get ready to join them as a tube. They're both on their own loop. I have all the tools I need. I have my scissors to snip my yarn. I have my needle so I can graft the stitches together. I have 2 little removable stitch markers. I'll show you those in a minute. And I have the yarn that I'm going to snip. The first thing that I want to do is to adjust my stitches on the one end of my work, and I'm going to adjust them on the end that I just picked up for my provisional cast on. Now, you don't always have to do this, but I am going to do this because instead of joining my loop in the round as a circle like so, I'm actually going to put a half twist in it, which means I'm just going to twist my yarn once like that to create a half twist in my work, and then I'm going to join it together for this cowl. And as you will see, my needles aren't aligned the same at both sides. So what I'm going to do is I know how many stitches I have on my needle. I know where halfway is, and I'm just going to scoop my needles around so that my needles poke out on the same side for the top and the bottom. So I'm just going to get to work and do that now. And I've ended up at exactly halfway between one of the vertical stripes on the opposite side to where I started. So my needles are poking out the right end now. I'll remove my marker because I don't need that now to do my counting, and tuck my yarn away, and I'm ready to begin. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to snip my yarn so that the length of it is about 4 times the circumference of my tube. So I'll work out what 1 times the circumference is. Just wind it round like that. Take it to the other side. So that's about 1 circumference. If I double that, it makes 2. And if I double that, it should make 4. And I'll just add on a little bit more for good measure. Right, that's that with my yarn. Next thing, I'm going to just thread my needle with my yarn, my working yarn. My wool needle, you just need a nice fat wool needle with a blunt tip. I like these ones with a bend in them, but straight ones are fine too. So I'm all ready to work. Here's the length of yarn that I'm ready to graft with. I'll try not to get that in a knot. You'll note that because of the pattern I'm working, I'm still using 2 strands of yarn to graft with. Okay, the next thing I need to do is, I've got my needles aligned in opposite directions. I need to give my cowl a half twist so that my needles are aligned the same, and then I'm ready to graft my 2 ends together. Our working yarn is at the back on our last stitches that we worked, and this is the provisional pickup in front looking at me. Now what we want to do is to join our tube like so. So the right sides are joined together all the way around. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to join our front needle of the provisional pickup. We're going to ignore the back part. We're going to ignore the front needle on the back part. We're going to go straight to the back needle. So I'm going to call this front needle, back needle. And we're going to join the front needle and the back needle together. We're going to get rid of these other middle, all these ones that lie in the middle here. We're going to get rid of those, tuck those away. We will get to them, but we're going to start our working yarn at the back, and we're going to join our front needle stitches to our back needle stitches. Now, you'll notice that the back needle stitches, some are the double stitches with both yarn held together, and some are the single. Just be careful to work those as they're presented. Don't try and join extra stitches together. That just makes the pattern flow nicely when we do it like that. And there was one final step we'll work at the end of this to make that all tidy. So the first thing we're going to do before we get started is grab our removable markers, and we're going to put a removable marker into the first stitch on the front needle, like so. A removable marker into the first stitch on the back needle, and that is a single yarn stitch. Now we're going to join our stitches together by grafting them together, And we're going to do that in garter because the background stitch of all of this has been garter. So we're going to join them together with garter. Garter grafting is actually quite easy. And because we're working in the round, we don't have to worry with setting up our stitches. We can just launch straight into it. And it's a simple pattern that's repeated on the front and the back the whole way round. And it goes like this. The first stitch, you put your needle in as if to knit, and you drop that stitch off your needle. Boom, away it goes. Then you bring your needle and you put it into the second stitch as if to purl, and you leave it on the needle and you just carefully pull your yarn all the way through. We go carefully because we don't want to end up with any knots. And we pull it all the way through and we leave it there. And then now we do exactly the same on the back needle. We put the needle into the first stitch as if to knit, and we drop it off the needle, and into the second stitch as if to purl, and then we pull our yarn all the way through. Now our working yarn is traveling under our needles. We're going to try not to get tangled up with all of these other needles, and at first with the stitch markers as well, so those stitch markers are clear. And that's good. So we bring our yarn back to the front and we're going to start again on the front stitches. The first stitch, you go into the first stitch. Don't forget to work both the legs of that stitch. It's a double stitch. The first one is if to knit and drop it off your needle. The second stitch is if to purl and leave it on the needle. And just pull your working yarn all the way through. We move to the back stitches. First one is if to knit and drop it off the needle. Second one is if to purl, leave it on the needle and just pull your yarn all the way through. Bring your yarn under the needles again. First stitch is if to knit, drop. Second stitch is if to purl, leave it on the needle, pull it all the way through. And then we'll do the back again. First stitch is if to knit and drop. Second stitch is if to purl. Bring it all the way through. Okay, and we just carry that on all the way around, and it's creating a nice garter ridge here in our work. When I'm thinking about tensioning my yarn, I want to make it not too tight and not too loose. So you're going for that sort of Goldilocks zone where it's an even tension. So just be mindful of that as you're working, and through the front and drop and through the back, and just keep a light hand as you're pulling your yarn through. You just want to keep a little eye on the stitches you're working. That's going to the back now, and I'll drop that one off and I'll pull it through. And I'm just keeping a relatively light hand. Now blocking does wonders for things. And where you have reasonably busy yarn, you're not going to notice this a little bit of different tension too much. But I just like to keep an eye on it as I go to make sure things aren't too tight but not too loose. And you can look back at the stitches that you're working and just check, do they look about the same size as the others? And just adjust as you're going, pulling slightly tighter, loosening as you go. Okay, I'm going to keep going, knit the front and drop, purl the back and leave, and so on, back and front, all the way round until there is one stitch left on my needle, on each needle, and I'll show you what to do to finish off. Okay, we've reached the end. We've got 2 stitches left on our needles, and we've got our little stitches with our stitch markers through them. The way we're going to finish off, I've just finished, so I've finished on a back. I'm about to start the front stitch again. So I knit into the front stitch as if to knit, and I drop it, and then I reach into the second stitch, which is on my stitch marker, and I just work into that as if to purl, and I pull all the way through. Then I go to the back and I knit that first stitch on the needle and drop it, and I pick up the stitch marker and I work into that stitch as if to purl and pull my yarn all the way through. Like so. Now I'm just going to get rid of my stitch markers because I've just closed the round, because you remember at the beginning we didn't do that setup, so it's almost as if we're doing it at the end. So I finish my round like so, and I'm just going to weave my end away so that I close up the end. And there we are. I finished my grafting. Got the needle out of the way, both needles out of the way now. And the grafting has finished. Now, can we see it? This is the question. Got to find it again. Here it is, up here. It's going to be quite tricky to find, but you can see it here because when you're doing a provisional cast on and then you're grafting, everything's off by half a stitch. So these little panels here that are meant to, these little stripes that are meant to join, don't join. Now you might decide that that's it. I don't want to do any more. I am finished. I have this lovely little cowl now. It's all finished and ready to roll. And you might decide that you'll leave that little join at the back. I've got to find it again. I keep losing it. It's there. You might decide you're going to leave that. But if you don't want to leave it and you want to hide it, then I have a tutorial for that, and I'll see you in the next video.